I wish I knew how to quit you.
Then why don't you?
This is Codependent Content, a podcast where my partner and I discuss the TV shows, movies, and video games in which we've formed an unhealthy relationship. My name is Mattias, and my co-host is Shannon Riley. Join us each week as we try to make sense of the media we continually give our hearts against our better judgment, and commiserate with us as we struggle and fail to let go of the characters, stories, and worlds that we are entangled with. Because just when we think we're done with content, it draws us back in.
Episode 5, Shadow Warrior.
What are we talking about? I don't know the Star Wars you're talking about.
Oh, fuck. We retconned the name. Star Whales, episode 5.
Oh, right.
Shadow Whale.
Star Whales. That new show.
That new show that's slapping.
It's just about whales that go into hyperspace.
That's all it needs to be about.
As you heard, we're talking about Star Whales again. We're talking about, more specifically, Ahsoka episode 5, Shadow Warrior. Yes, we are 5 episodes in out of 8.
Crazy.
So only 3 episodes left, which is Shannon bringing me to more and closer to the conclusion that we're not going to see Ezra, or probably not even see Ezra and Thrawn until probably the last episode, and it's really just going to be a whole lead up to whatever the movies are going to be.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a big old setup.
I have a suspicion that we might find one before the other. Like, we might stumble upon Ezra in 9 and
Probably
then save Thrawn for 10 or vice versa.
I feel like we're gonna see Thrawn. I say this also because I find it interesting that the actor who plays Ezra has not promoted anything.
They can't promote anything.
Once the show's out, you would think that like he could say like, "Hey, Ahsoka's pretty cool" or something. Like he can.
Well, even Selena Gomez got blasted for celebrating only murders
I forgot.
in the building.
Yeah, I keep forgetting about the strike. That's my bad. Well, Star Wars is still posting stuff, and I'm surprised that they don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess you're right. If he's part of SAG,
Yeah.
that makes sense. I wasn't thinking about it. Yeah, I guess I haven't seen. Yeah.
And
right.
even I forget what the Star Wars thing like just happened, but they used Chopper as the main image and like the little networking thing. And it's like, yeah, I love Chopper. I'll be the first to admit it. But you're using Chopper because you can't have any of your actors here.
Well, this is a reminder that we can't. That sucks.
Right?
To be in like a huge show and probably gonna make a big like this is like probably a big breakout for you, and you can't even say like I like the show, or go watch the show.
Yeah.
You can't promote it at all. That really sucks.
It does.
I mean, pay these people
what
they deserve.
Exactly.
Who knows what he was paid too? Like that's the
Pay
thing.
your
It's
fucking
like,
people.
if you're not even, because it seems like we're not even going to get there. I feel like we're going to get more Thrawn, and then if we even refer to Ezra, if he's not dead, it's going to be like a last minute like cliffhanger kind of thing or whatever.
It's interesting. I like that you think we're going to see Ezra before Thrawn because...
That's not what I said. I said we're going to see Thrawn first.
I'm sorry, that's what I meant. And then I was thinking about what I wanted to say, which is I think we're going to see Ezra before Thrawn, almost because I feel conditioned that like the big baddie's what you save for like your last little clip or your last little like, oh no, we are going to find them. And for a show that's so much about, or that's trying so hard to be about like family, community, togetherness, like choosing kindness and loyalty over other things. It's like, would you find Thrawn first? Or would you find Ezra, like kind of get the band back together and then move forward together as Thrawn becomes this more imminent threat, which then would set us up for the movies as well, because I don't think the movies are going to be about finding Ezra. So I almost feel like you have to kind of wrap that up before you can enter into.
No, I think they're going to find him. I think they're
movies.
just going to find him at the end.
Yeah.
And then the movies will involve Ezra a lot more. This is about Sabine and Ahsoka and certain things and whatever arcs that they're going through. Ahsoka, we have kind of gotten her through that, and Sabine still has to go through that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm assuming Ezra has a big part of that. But I feel like we need to get to Thrawn and set him up as a credible threat and understand like his deal, especially for those who haven't seen him
Mhm.
in the series, even though there are books about him and there's like Rebels really involved him. Like we haven't seen him in live action, and you got to set him up as this huge threat for these movies. And also it feels like this is setting up like the big arc for what happened in between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens.
Mhm.
This is our first major arc for that, even though we've been doing these TV shows and involving these things in it. We have not gotten like a huge, as you know, I guess, movie worthy arc, I should say. I don't know if movie worthy. It's not that these aren't movie worthy, but they are like a lot of setup and a lot of just small adventures, things like that, you know?
Mhm.
So I do think that in their goal, especially as the bad guys, are going to be achieved first in order to introduce him, catch everyone up to speed, and then not take the focus away, and then suddenly make Ezra the like main character again. Because unfortunately, when his story is so intertwined with Thrawn and whatever's happened, you're going to take away from Sabine and Ahsoka, I think, when you introduce Ezra and then put focus on him and what he's been doing and what he wants now. You know, I don't think they would do that. And plus, we got to get to Thrawn and then get him back or whatever. So I do. That's why I feel like Ezra's going to be still sidelined until the very end.
Yeah,
because I think anytime you mention Ezra or bring Ezra, it's going to take away from the story that you're trying to tell with these characters.
It's a good guess. I also think that Hera, since we're talking about like the crew, Hera seems so superfluous for the most part. That she's here, but she's not really like integral to what's happening. And I'm kind of hoping that I know in the last season of The Mandalorian, we know that there's like Imperial spies. And I'm wondering if there's going to be a subplot set up for Hera when she goes back to, where is it? Is it Coruscant? Is that the planet she's going back to?
Yes.
If maybe there's going to be something for her to do in that realm, because right now it's like she's just kind of here and she's not doing anything. So it's like, how do we, or are we even going to include her in like the plot moving forward? Or did she just get her couple little scenes and now we've moved on to galaxy jumping and whale riding?
Sure. I think that's a question for later. We're not at that point yet. I was just talking about, that we can talk about Hera and Jacen and what you want to see or whatever, I think, when we get to that part. Is that okay?
Yeah, of course. I was just thinking about like future episodes, what we're expecting to see in future episodes. I'm wondering if Hera is going to play a role in future episodes, or do you think that we've moved away from any Hera plots because she just went back to Coruscant?
Well, let's talk about, we can talk about future episodes later. I was mostly talking about like the shortened length of the season and how we've been stuck on Cedos for the past 5 episodes, basically. Not necessarily, I guess 3 episodes, and then how they're finally getting on their way leads me to believe this is just more and more set up for the movies, and that we're not going to get what we think we were going to get.
That makes sense.
So that's all I was trying to say. This
okay,
isn't, we can still talk about our anticipation and whatever in the when we get to that
later through the
section.
Episode. Bet.
So.
All right.
Don't get ahead of yourself, Shannon.
I'm always cart before the horse. Well, in true podcast fashion, then, do you want to talk about what we've been watching?
Yeah, you want to talk about One Piece?
Yeah, I really liked One Piece, the live action version on Netflix. I have not seen One Piece otherwise. And when I think about One Piece and I look at how much there is to consume, it is daunting to me. I know Mattias and a few members at my gym have recommended watching One Piece instead, where it cuts out like 140 hours of watch time or something crazy like that. And I might get into it because I was not expecting to like these characters as much as I did, as quick as I did either, because I have no exposure to Luffy otherwise, except for like a couple weird drawings on the internet. And I was like, oh, I don't think I'm gonna care about this at all. But yeah, by episode 2, it's like the actors they cast are so perfect for the roles that they play. And I feel like everybody knows what kind of show they're in. The stunt work fucking slaps. The wire work is so grounded. And are you good? Are you looking something up?
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. The stunt work's just so grounded. It was awesome, kind of all around. So yeah, I liked it.
Mm-hmm. I just don't have any more to add. So I figured you loved it so much, and
it was good.
It's worth checking out. We have had bad anime adaptations in the past, and I don't know how this fares as an adaptation. Because again, we haven't seen the anime. I refuse to watch shonen anime now, and especially 1,000 episodes of a anime show is just not going to be on my list anytime soon. I was hesitant to check out One Piece based on previous experience, and I quickly fell in love with it and the world and how they were telling the story, and mostly because there's clearly, I don't know if it's just like a lot of money was put into it, but someone has some passion in there. You know, they approached everything really, really thinking about it. All the actors know what show they're in, and they are acting there as earnestly as possible within that. And I love that. And again, as you said, the wire work, the stunts are actually really, really cool. And the world building is really awesome. A lot of that I know is down to the artist and the person who created One Piece. And then it just translates into how they've managed to bring that forward into the live action. And of course, I think that I heard 18 million was spent on each episode or something as an average.
Yeah.
Probably some more than others, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, I think it might not be a good adaptation, but it is a good, fun story.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm glad it's getting told in this way, and with some passion behind it, and with some clear, actual, distinct directing and filmmaking work, and really putting some passion into these things. The actor who plays Luffy is a treasure, and is rubbing off on me. So like from the very beginning, you know, and I think even from the trailers, I was like, this kid has got something. And that's what got me into checking it out. It's because it felt like there was something about his charisma and there was something about the personality that was like, okay, this looks different and feels different already. Even though it also looks like every other bad anime adaptation Netflix has done, there's something about the actors that are drawing me in, and so I was like, I want to at least check it out, and lo and behold, it was actually pretty great. So yeah. Anything else you want to say about One Piece?
Go watch it.
I'm always on the verge of getting rid of my Netflix subscription. Because it has been, as we said, I think a couple of weeks ago, like Apple TV's been killing it, and Max is usually pretty good, and Netflix has been something that I open the least amount.
Yeah.
And of course, there's always that one show that I'm like, okay, maybe I'll keep it. So they got me for that. Even though they dropped it all, it probably could just be like getting rid of the subscription, getting it for like a month, and then getting it
absolutely
until the next show comes out. But we'll see. Maybe I'll keep it around for a little bit longer. Yeah. Something else we've been watching, it's kind of a personal plug as well, is Fables D20, or The Curse of Amity Island, which is an actual play from Fables D20. And it is, The Curse of Amity Island is loosely based off of Jaws, the movie. and the campaign is now got 6 episodes up out of not sure how many is going to be, but as every other actual play in the vein of Critical Role, in the vein of Dimension 20, all your other actual plays that you love. This one takes place, though, in a world of the DM's creation called, I'm going to butcher it because I can never pronounce it right, Eyrde, I think. It's Eyrde, Eyrde.
Sounds good.
And Carmichael, who is a close friend, a personal friend, and peer, has been DMing that campaign. I think he's been doing really great work on his channel and all the world building and stuff, and he's only been DMing apparently since the pandemic.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
You gotta listen to the podcast, Shannon.
Hey, baby steps. I'm watching the actual play.
Has been a great, fun actual play to pay attention to. Is there anything you want to say on it before I get into like the personal reasons why?
No, go for it. Tell me your personal reasons.
Well, have you been enjoying it? You have nothing to say about the show at all?
Yes, everything you just said. I'm enjoying it. It's in the vein of every other actual play. It's just like, we're watching our friend do really cool things with really talented people. So yeah, it's great.
Okay. Well, I wanted her to say all that because, I am also helping to edit. I've started editing since episode 4. And it's something that we may also get to be involved in later on in the actual play and do some D&D content in the next campaign. I won't give away what it is. I know we talk about it. It's all kind of out there, but I'll let him keep that a secret. But I've been editing the episodes, and I'm going to continue editing because it's a fun thing. So I wanted to put that out there that we enjoy it beyond being involved in it is what I was trying to get. But I am involved in it, so that's a kind of a personal plug. So a little bit selfish, marketing to get you guys to go listen to it. But apparently Shannon doesn't enjoy it beyond that, so I don't know.
No, don't put those words in my mouth. I said I liked it. And another thing I can add to that is that it's a lot shorter than a lot of other things you're going to watch. So if you have a difficult time focusing on a certain thing for an extended period of time, like I sometimes do, episodes are incredibly bite-sized chunked. You can sit through a 45-minute episode and get the whole vibe, and then you decide if you want to continue on for another 2 hours or if you need to take a break to move on with your life. So
that is something that is, I should mention, is a huge goal and a huge mission in terms of how Carmichael is trying to create the show, which is he calls ADHD friendly actual play, which is to say it's like the sessions are fairly long. Probably not as many sessions, but when places like Critical Role has like 100 episodes per campaign, and each of those episodes are basically live streams and they're 4.5 hours, and then Dimension 20, they do contain their stories, but they are essentially still 2.5 hour movies every time you watch, and releasing that once a week, it's kind of hard to keep up. Honestly, actual plays, they're easy to feel long. It's easy, even though like it's good content, there's maybe some good actors and improvers and stuff like that. It's easy to feel long, if it's one of those things you turn on in the background, jump into the live stream.
Yeah.
Definitely can understand, it's like you're hanging out with your friends kind of thing. I understand that version of it, but in terms of like watching something that is after the fact, maybe edited or whatever, it can feel like a slog a little bit at times, And so our goal is to create something and get better at it in the playing as well. But as of now, at least in the editing, how much can we pare these episodes down to a tight 45 minutes to an hour? So you're not spending you don't feel like you're spending your entire weekend just trying to catch up or something like that, So shorter episodes, a little bit faster paced, hopefully, if I'm doing my job correctly and I'm getting better at it. Again, I only started with episode 4, I believe, and we're slowly learning how the workflow is going to be, things like that. But yeah, that's something, if you're interested in something that's a little bit shorter, not as much to get into, especially not 1,000 episodes of One Piece or something.
Right.
And no shade on Critical Role or Dimension 20. It's just like, we don't even keep up with every single campaign on Dimension 20. And I would never even start Critical Role at episode 1 because there's just absolutely no way I'm going to try and figure out how to fit in like 4 hours. It was already enough to try and do Lost. So
I started Critical Role episode 1 and I've just moved past it and got into episode 2 and I'm like, I've already listened to 5.5 hours of this game and I'm only on episode 2 of like a billion. So it can be really daunting, but yeah, Amity Island is a great way to get your feet wet if you're looking for an option.
The chat's on it. They said ADHD&D, which is perfect. I'm gonna steal that. Great. Good job. That's exactly what we needed. So yeah, if you're interested in D&D style content, please go watch or listen to Fables D20, Curse of Amity Island, and hopefully be on the lookout for yours truly's. I don't know how to pluralize that.
That was perfect.
Us truly's. Nope. Okay.
Yours truly's.
Look out for us in the future. Go subscribe. Do that kind of thing. That's my shout out. Let's get into, because we didn't get into any feedback from last week's episode, so I wanted to get a little bit into that. One, Kevin came through again and gave us some usable titles for people like Balin, Shin, and Inquisitors that might be great, especially after last week's episode. Fallen Jedi. He also suggested Fallen, Dark Jedi, or Dark Sider. And I'm like, okay, those are doing great. Some of those are basically kind of what we've been saying, but a little bit more efficient. I can work with these, you know.
A nice Dark Jedi.
I still like Bendu was also like a really cool thing, but again, that's not been introduced to us in the show. So I do like that. Fallen Jedi does seem to be like a pretty decent one, especially when all these people are coming from that.
Yeah.
And then to shorten that, Fallen makes a lot of sense because they're definitely not Sith, you know. So yeah, that's just one thing to mention there. We have other things about a lot of people are still getting on to me for even suggesting that I guess that Jedi aren't good pilots. So that's just one thing to mention. But they keep bringing up the weirdest little things that I feel like just people take everything so literally in Star Wars, and you just forget, you know, because they're like, well, Anakin was just was just the best pilot that ever lived. I'm like, well, first off, that's kind of also what I'm saying, was that he was supposed to be good,
same thing.
But also like who from whose account do we know that? And it's only Obi-Wan,
right?
Who said in the original movie he was like one of the best pilots that he's ever seen or whatever. And so isn't that, you know, yes, I understand why Jedi can make good pilots, but isn't that supposed to be like Anakin was supposed to be an outlier in that sense? Like he was also a good pilot. He was a pilot before he was a Jedi.
Tapping it, yeah.
You know, I don't know. It's just weird little things for me. Anything that you want to address about?
I really enjoyed the conversation we had last week with some people online too about deciding if Sabine did or did not tap into the Force. People are incredibly opinionated and often believe that their opinion is 100% accurate. So it's really interesting to like have a bunch of people watch the exact same thing and have two completely different opinions. But how fun to generate that sort of conversation of whether she accessed the Force or not. Like it still has so such weight onto her character development and onto the choices that she makes, that's really the fun conversation to have. So yeah, I love little moments like that where we're all watching the same thing, but we all get something just a little bit different out of it. So that was a fun TikTok conversation to have with some people.
Yeah, absolutely. We have someone that, speaking of like Force users and Sabine's like ability, whether or not, I think even on our like second episode, we had someone come and say that they feel like we said that we expected Sabine to be instantly good at something. Whenever I suggested, I believe that like, why didn't we see her try and tap into it or try and use it, which was contrary to my actual point.
Yeah.
Which is weird. So people are misunderstanding all the time. It's just a way that I guess Star Wars people take things like so very specifically. They latch on to the one thing that you said, and disregard like the intention and the context of in which it's being said.
Right.
And in no way do I even want Sabine to be good at the Force.
Same.
If that's the point of these episodes, is that you don't need the Force, then I don't want her to be good at it, know? But they also put emphasis on it, and it feels like you would be trying,
Yeah.
It feels like you would at least be attempting to understand like what your connection is with it and how you can use that or not use it or whatever, And again, just with anything, like just because someone says like, it takes some time and practice doesn't mean you're not going to do it.
Right.
I guess unless Sabine is waiting for the AI solution to drawing and art.
Boo.
She's gonna what I say? What?
Boo.
We got a problem? We got a problem here? Oh, you gotta actually draw and practice and
Boo. Just kidding. I kid.
The people and the crowd is turning against me. There was more things I was gonna bring up, but those are some things, and I don't know. At the end of the day, it's like I wish people would understand like what we're trying to say is like is to have a conversation about it. Never we're never saying anything definitive.
Right.
Is to say it's like we don't know what they're trying to do or what the intentions are or how they want to play things out, and we're just attempting to have conversations about things. I didn't even bring that up to start talking like defending our stance. It's not even like what I wanted to do. I've just it's noticeable how much people don't want to have conversations online and just tell us how much like we're cringe or wrong or that, Star Wars has been ruined and all that kind of stuff.
And I will say I am both cringe and wrong often, and I'm okay with that. But yeah, it's like the fun of being in a fandom is being part of the fandom and having the conversations. So that's why I like being in the Star Wars fandom. And I will say definitively, without a shadow of doubt, that Chopper is one of the best characters ever to come from Star Wars. And if someone wants to come for me for saying that definitively, then get in the comments. And with that, I believe.
Nope.
Oh, I'm like,
every time you try and like segue,
let's get out of here
into something. As always, if you want a good lore dump, though, there's some good stuff that Kevin brought to the table on our latest episode on the comments. So please go and do that. Speaking of YouTube, something I forgot to bring up and something I need to ask people to please let me know what your experience is with, because we're trying new things and I'm learning more and more about how YouTube is doing things. Specifically, I do not monetize the channel or the videos because I don't want you to see ads. But apparently, as of the past like 2 years ago, that doesn't matter. I have YouTube Premium, so I don't see ads ever. So I didn't ever pay attention to this. But even though I'm not a YouTube partner or I'm not monetizing the channel, you might still be seeing ads. So that sucks. And I'm curious about that. I'm curious, like, what your experience is with that. If you're seeing ads on these YouTube videos, where you're listening to this, and what you might be experiencing, because I want y'all to know that that was never my intention. As long as people are seeing ads, when I eventually do get the chance to control that and maybe do something, hopefully I can do something about that and maybe monetize or whatever, so that at least we're getting at something or controlling it in some way. But I guess I don't want to do that if it is true that y'all are seeing ads or without me monetizing them. I would hope that because I don't have that access and I'm not monetizing, that you're not seeing ads, but maybe you are, and we might as well try and figure out how to work around that or whatever. I hope it's not the case. I hope that's not true. Maybe we don't have enough of following or whatever. If that ever becomes the case, I definitely want to. I
sometimes, similar to Fables, the D20, I sometimes get 2 ads before I'll start our podcast, but I have the option to skip them after 5 seconds. So I don't actually have to sit through them and watch them. And then the whole episode isn't like chunked up with ads or anything. So that's from my experience, but it doesn't happen with every episode. So I don't know how it decides when you get an ad and when you don't.
It's all based on personal behaviors and your own watching experience, from what I can tell. So that's not, it's a whole lot that we can't do as like a channel, you know, and there's a little bit of like how many people are actually watching, things like that. My goal was always to not monetize because I don't want to interrupt your experience with ads. And the only time I would monetize is if we were like huge enough with like, 20,000 like listeners or something like that. Sure. I don't know what number I would put on that. It would be high enough where I'm like, okay, let's go ahead and do it. Especially if you're already getting delivered ads, But I didn't want to do that because it doesn't make any sense to me. I don't want to deliver ads to people, but that kind of pisses me off if YouTube's doing that. I also don't know if Spotify does that. I hold off on doing any ads on Spotify or our own personal ads, and I'm not monetizing there. And I don't know if other areas are doing that. Maybe not. When I see the podcasts on like Google or whatever, it seems like everything's ad free, just like podcasts should be. But I don't know if things are getting changed with anything. So let me know what your ad experience is like so I can understand it and maybe hopefully change it or fix it. There's not much I can actually do. But maybe there's a way to find a way to give you non-ad ones if we need to get to that point. Maybe something that we would have to offer in the future. If it's not a problem, won't worry about it for now, if you guys don't have a problem with it. But yeah, just let me know. Give me feedback. And you can always give us feedback and email us at codependentcontent@gmail.com. And again, go comment on our YouTube channel is one of the better places, or just commenting on TikTok or whatever, which is where most people are finding this anyway, and not listening to the full podcast. But there are all those options. That said, and that out of the way, I guess, Shannon, if you want to segue now to...
With that, let us enter our discussion of episode 5. Let me get my laptop here so I can open my notes.
Oh, so you didn't need your laptop for the introduction.
I literally only put it down because you gave me shit for it, and I don't know if you cut it out.
And now you need it.
I only put it down so you wouldn't give me shit about it. Let's start with just general feelings. How did you like or dislike this episode, and how are you feeling moving forward with 3 episodes left?
I don't feel good moving forward with only 3 episodes left.
Don't feel great.
It feels like we got some momentum and then we like lost it. I understand how important this episode is for the title character of Ahsoka, so it's great. Mm-hmm. It is on the surface a good episode, but then also feels like could have been also like half of like a full episode. This probably could have been truncated down and like delivered in a much more impactful way. When we only have 3 episodes left, I feel like if we were going on like 14 episodes or something like that, this would have been a decent, maybe even 12, just like a decent midway point. Actually, this is episode 5, I guess. I don't know. You know, like this feels like it's not an unimportant episode. It just feels like they're stretching out everything else, especially all the stuff around what actually happened with Ahsoka. And that's the problem with the majority of the series for me, whereas like it feels like it keeps getting stretched and stretched and stretched in order to fit these like run times. And I feel like either you could have packed in more or you could have just I guess just done less episodes instead of trying to stretch it or whatever. So I don't know. So that's not to say like I did really enjoy the episode and the journey that we kind of went through, and we'll talk more about that. That's just where
yeah. I enjoyed this episode for what it made me think about, which I guess is what media is supposed to do. It's supposed to leave you with like thoughts and opinions. I really love how deeply you can think about Ahsoka's journey from the time that she's obviously a very young child through to the Ahsoka that we meet in her titular show. It's also making me hungry for more information. So in a sense, I think it's doing its job, pulling me into the fandom, and it's really making me want to go watch Rebels and Clone Wars and all of the like supplemental shows that I don't have the knowledge for. I think there's a lot of depth and a lot of interesting things that happen to these characters that you're right. Sometimes in this show specifically, I'm like, this feels like table setting, but I'm not as invested as I should be. And then when you're giving me these like heavy-handed moments of like, hey, don't forget this is important, I'm like not interested in those either because I don't want it to be delivered that way. I want to like grow into it. And then I'm like, oh, it's because I have to go watch the show where they did actually cultivate all these relationships. But anyway, so things that really worked for me in this episode include Anakin, some of the visualizations between like Anakin and Darth Vader. I also really loved the portrayal of young Ahsoka. And I think that those two actors had some of the better chemistry of this show. And the Star Whales at the end really do, touching on what you said in like episode 3, it's like you see those bad boys and you're just like ready. Like I'm excited. I'm ready for whatever the fuck they're going to do. So it left me on a cool note, and you know, I was kind of along for the ride on this one.
I'm curious if chat can let us know how many episodes are in a typical season of Rebels. I could probably easily look it up, but I don't have it in front of me. Just again, because this does feel like an episode that wouldn't be out of place in a season of Clone Wars or Rebels. But again, we only have 8 episodes for this one season, and because we don't have any context of where the rest of the we're probably not even going to get another Ahsoka season. I know they mentioned earlier it does feel like that a lot of this and Ezra's maybe future introduction will be a backdoor pilot for something. This whole season feels like table setting. This all feels like very much a setup for what's coming next. What's coming next probably isn't going to be another Ahsoka show. It's probably going to be the movies. And then what happens with Ahsoka and everyone else after that is going to be interesting. So in that essence, like I feel like we're just kind of lost and just like, okay, what are you actually like leading to? And then does this episode feel like it fits or not? Because we don't have any context there. So I don't know.
Yeah.
And again, maybe if we had more episodes to deal with, or we knew what the future was, that we were like, okay, great, this would be a great episode. But also we have like 10 more things to go. So we would have like, we knew how much content we were actually kind of getting. And here, I guess we're just like left without knowing. And so it feels weird and stretched and whatever. I don't know.
Yeah,
so
that makes sense. In Rebels, there's 15, 22, 22, and 16 episodes.
So yeah, 22. This would not feel out of place in like a 22,
I would argue even like
season.
15 episodes, like this wouldn't feel weird either. It's just, I'm not gonna beat this dead horse, but I'm just going to say not every show benefits from having a smaller number of episodes. I do believe lots of shows benefit from a smaller number of episodes, and I do not believe that this is one of them.
It's weird that Disney keeps doing this weird shortened, like 8 to 10 episodes. Not even, I think and even especially like Andor had 12, right? It was the one where they packed so much into it, and it benefited so well, and that Disney doesn't. I feel like Disney wants the content.
Yeah.
Like, why not pay for 22 episodes of a season? You know,
Yes.
You might as well. But there's this weird like back end because everything has to be secret now, and we're trying not to do like give to. We need to just give little tastes here and there. And I'm like, okay, great. So here's this little taste that we got. Well, like Obi-Wan, wasn't that only like 6 too? Like they're doing miniseries, but then not.
Yeah, but not with like the weight or the emotional integrity of a miniseries.
Yeah.
It's like you're giving me fodder of what should be a 24 episode series in 6 in like a very limited run, and it's not enough to fill my plate. It doesn't even feel like an appetizer.
Yeah, so that's the main criticism of this episode.
Yeah.
I feel like, and again, that doesn't mean I didn't like the episode. It's just weird storytelling for me that it's like, oh, we have time to tell this, focus on this one character. And it's like, well, you don't have the time. But I guess you do have the time, because if you're not going to give us anything else in the future, then that's why it becomes a problem for me. So, yeah, that said, we can move on to the actual deep dive into the episode, Shannon. Is that what you'd like to do?
That sounds great.
Do you have any thoughts on the title of this one like you did last week? Shadow Warrior?
I do, and it ties for me into Ahsoka, and similar to how we do shadow work for ourselves and we meet our shadow selves, and that's like a therapy technique that we can use. I feel like Shadow Warrior for Ahsoka is she's spent so much of her life thinking that like violence is it, and like war and battle and conflict, and like that's it. That's who she is. That's who she brings. That's part of her legacy. So therefore it's part of her destiny. And doing this work in this episode informs the title for me. Okay,
great. We start off the episode I'm pretty much right where it left off, with Hera and Jacen, and now they're on the planet Cetos, and they are searching for Ahsoka or Sabine, anyone, and they're all gone, and they can't find them. And they eventually do find Huyang, who has gotten to the site first, and has also found the helmet in the woods, the Sabine's Mandalorian helmet, and lamenting that he told them to stick together, but they never listen.
They never listen. Huyang is old as hell and obviously has a lot of experience and exposure with these two, but I always wonder like where the weight of those words comes from. Also, how like heartfelt and heartbroken a robot's voice can sound. And I guess shout out to David Tennant for just like voice acting the fuck out of Huyang all the time. But like, because I'm inferring it too, it's just like you can feel that he's like affected by what is happening, for whatever that means to a droid. I also forgot that Sabine lost her helmet in the woods. Now that you say that, obviously I remember it. So I'm wondering why he was standing like off the cliff, like right on the edge of the cliff, holding the helmet. I wonder if he was just having a moment, seeing how far, maybe seeing if he could find a body, and that's just kind of where he ended up. But yeah, see, I gotta go watch Rebels or something. I need to know like why Huyang is so like acutely aware of the apparent power and dynamic between Ahsoka and Sabine, because we still haven't been shown that quite yet in the actual show Ahsoka. But Hu Yang is always there to inform us, like, you're stronger together, you're better together. They never listen to me when I tell them to stay together. And it's like, what? I didn't catch any of that. But yeah, so we find Hu Yang, and I think we can just continue in this moment. We get to spend time with Hera and Jacen, even though it's brief. I really like seeing Hera like be a mom and take her child seriously when he's able to tell her that like he feels like he's picking up on something, and she doesn't like shoo him away or shut him down. She's juggling being like an adult and a commander with responsibilities and tasks to do, while also trying to pay full attention to her child and what her child is feeling in that moment. And I liked watching her juggle those two parts of herself. And then watching Jacen, getting more of those nuggets that Jacen is force sensitive and can really tap into what's happening. What's a fun little moment for me.
Well, it's interesting because at first it feels like maybe he's like, I feel something, or do you hear that? And he clearly hears something in the waves, and he has her listen, and she also ends up tapping into that or hearing it. And it's like, okay, so just something's in the water, or he actually has this sensitivity that we are hoping for and looking for. But I don't know, because as far as I understand it, Hera doesn't have it, so like, how did she hear? So is it more of this place is force, obviously force sensitive, something connected to Ahsoka, something connected to the world between worlds. It's been here for thousands of years longer and built by an ancient people. Like, what is the ground that they're on, and the water and the waves? Like, how is that connected to this force thing in this world, which can happen? I don't think you necessarily need to be force sensitive to see or hear it or feel it. So, but he does have the curiosity and the attention of a child to be able to pay attention to that when the adults are focused on so many different things and whatever to do that. And so I like that it's still there, and it tells us something about Jacen. I'm just not sure that it tells us that he is force sensitive yet, though I'm sure that's true. I'm sure he is force sensitive. He's got something within him. He is a son of a Jedi. And so I think that is going to be there. This is just not the, I guess, smoking gun or the evidence of like where that sense of it, or how strong he is or whatever. It's just more of the attention of a child, right?
Yeah. I also like, we discussed previously about how apparently anyone can tap into the force because the force is within all of us, and possibly the idea of, you're right, if placement is important and the force sensitivity of the location is important, that maybe the force that resides in Hera, whether it's dormant or small or otherwise, is activated in this moment as her attention is drawn to it, that she's able to calm her mind and like feel that thing that apparently connects all of us.
Yeah, and I find it interesting for Jacen in that it seems like even if his mother, or there's obviously not many outlets for training a Jedi. That's fine. Like, we know he wants to be a Jedi. We know how much he looks up to his father, and we know about the stories now that Hera has told him, and how important it is to him, and how much that affected him into him wanting to be a Jedi and help people and do that kind of thing. Like the things of Hera and the things of his father, the personalities, are rubbing off on Jacen. And even though there's not many outlets, it's clear that Hera doesn't want him to focus on being a Jedi. It seems to me, though, that Jacen, regardless on whether his mother wants him or not, is kind of training himself, which is kind of just what you have to do as a Jedi nowadays. Because there's not any teachers, there's no people to take on Padawans, and I find it interesting that he has the patience and the calmness to kind of like take a moment, to tap into that. And in essence, he is kind of learning how to train himself, learning how to do what he needs to do because of what his goals are and what his dreams are, in the same way that people do have to be self-taught, in the same way that probably the first Jedis had to be,
Right.
to learn themselves. And in that way that Ahsoka mentioned, that it takes discipline and it takes time and it takes like having to kind of like train, and he has more discipline than Sabine does,
Mm-hmm.
I could be reading a little bit more into that, but I do feel like that could be something that is possibly there, is that he has the wherewithal to, at least if I'm not going to do it, I'm gonna try. I'm gonna at least keep going into it. If someone doesn't have the means or doesn't want you to be I don't know, I'm thinking of parents who are like, oh, go be like a lawyer instead, or go be that, or go do something, and don't be an artist, but like if there's an artist in you, you're going to draw, you're going to sketch,
Right.
you're going to teach yourself, you're going to get a book, you're going to learn something, you know what I'm saying? You're going to take in whatever you can from the stories and the observations that you have and tap into that. And to me, that's what I'm seeing in Jacen. I don't know if that's true or not, but that could is something that I see and I think is worth, again, noting in terms of the themes that we've been talking about before.
Yeah, I can see that. And then just to gently undercut it, I like, this is a little bit later, but when he realized that there's like a training room on the ship and he's like, can you train me? Huyang's like, no. I'm like, damn, this little kid, like he really just, he's ready to rock and roll. He's jumping at any opportunity he thinks he can find. And I love the way Huyang's just like, no.
Yeah, but again, if someone wants this training, I think eventually Hera has to give it.
Sure.
I think that might be the direction that they're going to go, because we do know, as people who are audience members, of seeing how Star Wars works out without proper training, and sometimes with proper training, like someone can turn out pretty badly, And if there is a gift in him, and if there is a desire or something, like you can't hold people back from these things, and you might as well you need to allow someone to cultivate that in a proper way. Now, granted, Hera probably hasn't run into anyone that could cultivate that, even with Ahsoka, because she probably didn't want. But now that Ahsoka has essentially changed, maybe there is a way for that to finally be cultivated.
Yeah.
And I think that it might be a direction that is eventually going to be headed to, with Ahsoka's character.
Mm-hmm.
But we can talk about that later. In the meantime, once he does make the connection and they hear the lightsaber battle like on the waves, then it becomes an all-out search across the water and things like that with the X-Wings and Hera, while Jacen and Chopper stay back.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the majority of their time.
Yes.
Whereas the majority of the episode takes place in the world between worlds, or a version of it, or I don't know, but we may never know. And as well as Ahsoka's memories as she battles for life or death with Anakin Skywalker, aka Darth Vader. Have you heard of him? Yeah, you.
Have you heard?
What's your experience, Shannon, with Darth? Nope, don't.
No, we're not gonna do that.
So yeah, let's go to the world between worlds, where we had recently been introduced to the de-aged version of Hayden Christensen.
Mm-hmm.
I will say, as opposed to last week, just quickly on the de-aging stuff, this week I didn't notice it. I didn't notice it whatsoever. I was actually looking for it. I was like, where did they? I was like, oh wait, maybe they de-aged him last time, because early on we go to where his haircut is back, and I'm like, okay, which version of Hayden Christensen are we seeing? Like, is he the actor with the long hair, or is he the actor with the short hair? And which one then did we have to cover up to have one or the other?
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't tell. So I think they did a great job. I had no problem with the de-aging or whatever. And there's some parts where I don't think they even tried to de-age him.
Yeah.
There's some close-ups where it's like there's a little bit of the older Anakin peeking through, which is fine because we just enjoy seeing Hayden Christensen reprise the role or whatever. So, but personally, unless I guess I'm looking really, really closely, I didn't notice it. Nothing bothered me. It almost took me out of it just trying to figure out if they did it or not.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know? And so I don't think, and normally it's because you could tell something's off. Here, it wasn't that. I think it was just me just trying to figure out like what was going on. And mostly because that first shot that we saw him in the last week's episode was just so completely, that was where something felt like it was off, you know?
Yeah.
And maybe if they had done the same amount of work that they did on this episode, I wouldn't have thought about it. So
maybe, yeah. I think a lot of the movement really helped me too. The fact that so much of seeing his face is like with movement, looking around in this like weird lighting, or I think that might have helped just a little bit as well. But I'm the same way. I was looking for it. And I was like, oh, I'm looking for it. I'm taking myself out of this now. It's because when it's glaring, it's glaring. It's right there. You don't have to look at all because you're just like, that's something's weird here. I had a blast. I feel like he had a blast doing this too. I hope he did.
Yeah, this is much better than the Obi-Wan cameo for him. Kind of probably what we wanted in the Obi-Wan things. I mean, don't get me wrong. The Obi-Wan has its merits in having brought Hayden Christensen back, especially to be under the mask of Darth Vader, and some really good moments in and throughout it. But if I don't think about those moments as much, you know, I guess, whereas this one feels a lot more strong for some reason. But yeah, that Hayden Christensen, so Anakin starts off, well, in catching up with what's happened, I should say, we kind of find out that Ahsoka is essentially dead for all intents and purposes. And this is going to clearly be a test for her to decide if she's going to move on or if she's going to be able to live. I feel like we can get more into parallels of that later on, but in other storytelling, because I know we'll talk about it, but here, not quite something we've ever seen in Star Wars. And then that also leads me, reveals to us that this isn't exactly, none of the theories I feel like were correct. So this is technically Force Ghost Anakin training her from the grave, in essence, but also is not him. It's kind of more of a memory. Is it the Force itself? And her connection with that. I know there's connections that she has with the Force and the world between worlds and things like that because of Clone Wars and Rebels. That's lore stuff. I don't feel like we necessarily need to get into, because at the end of the day, it's just more of just to present that this is all is really happening, is also not happening, and is essentially just like her is a huge test for her. Is her on the brink of death, and where she would go. Do you have anything to say on that before they start going through the memories and stuff?
Yeah, this whole sequence for me of her in this state, I like that you can take it multiple different ways, because as I was watching it, I was like, this isn't actually happening. Like, this is her reckoning with her own shit. Like, this is not Anakin coming back to teach her a lesson. This is Anakin teaching her a lesson.
Yeah.
In the like confines of her own experience. And I love that. If we're going to continue to talk about like the warrior path, and again, her legacy of violence, and how all of these things have been weighing on her, arguably to the point that it was like damaging the way that she lived and the way that she led her life and the way she was able to connect with people. So of course, in this moment of death in whatever capacity, those are the things that you reflect on. Am I going to live? Who am I if almost given like a second chance at life? And you have to heal these things in you and reckon with these things in you before you can come out like stronger or better or more intentional with your time. Which again, I think we'll talk more about as we get through these scenes. But yeah, I do like the idea of the world between worlds for her in this moment being more of a concept than like an actual place outside of time.
Yeah, I do think that this clearly has to be something because of her connection with the Force and her being this conduit for again, lore stuff, like kind of she was dead and brought back to life in Clone Wars, and so yeah, she essentially is the light side of the Force.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds weird to say, but it's a thing, right? Lore, I'm not here to nerd out about it. It clearly has to be something connected to that and her connection with the Force in general, because we've never seen anyone else. Like, why her instead of anyone else who's died, you know? And who else gets this option, you know? Kanan Jarrus didn't get this option. Anakin didn't get this option, or he just gave up, you know, because he felt like he didn't need to. He just moved on. In essence, maybe Obi-Wan had this option, but again, like, just let it go, you know? So it's this idea of like, do you have unfinished business? You know, what do you need? You know, stuff like that. But to me, it's like for most other people, we don't get this option, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So it clearly has something to do with her connection there. So it's just something worth noting that that's what is going on here, that this is about her connection with these places, and this place kind of exists and also kind of doesn't. Because I feel like the world between worlds being a nexus of time and space, that's not exactly where she is, because it all ends up being more of like this, just a place that could represent where she's at in her mind.
Mm-hmm.
That's not to say that Anakin isn't there, because he is essentially connected to the Force, and this is the Force, and that's why I feel like it is actually kind of happening, and that he is kind of there. He's not just a figment of her imagination. I don't think.
Okay.
I think it could be interpreted that way.
Sure.
But I do think that if her connection is with the Force, and him having been, we know, is a Force ghost, that this is essentially like kind of both. He's acting as the Force, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And what, you know, we don't know that much about the Force, even as much as we talk about, people love to talk about how much the Force, what the Force is, you know, and try and define it, you know, and every single Force user has tried to do that. We don't actually know.
Mm-hmm.
They don't actually know, you know. So in essence, this is Anakin and is the Force and is him kind of acting on the Force's behalf and kind of thing. And because of his connection with Ahsoka and her connection, it's a whole thing where it's like, it is and it isn't, and it is, you know what I'm saying? It's all kind of wrapped up in the amalgamation of, is it all a dream or not? Whatever, you know?
Right.
But for all intents and purposes, it is happening in a physical space. And I feel like it's important because of the parallels we get into later on. But yeah, so they start fighting after he says, like, they reveal that this is a test, and he needs to complete her training, and that training involves, you know, you need to either live or you need to die. Vague training stuff, you know? And, you know, they start attacking, and then he gets to jump on her, and because he knows how this imagination works and the memory, he, like, takes out the platform under her, and she goes crashing into the first memory, which is her and Anakin's, one of their first missions during the Clone Wars. And she is now young her. Amazing way to depict it, because I feel like in animation this kind of gets lost. I didn't realize how young she was supposed to be. as a Padawan during the Clone Wars, but it makes sense. It makes perfect sense. But yeah, to experience war at that age, and obviously to eventually get to the point where she loses Anakin, and all those things at that age that she was, and to be kind of banned from the Jedi Order, or not banned, but like it all happened at once. She walked away from it. It's a whole lot of things because she was framed for something that she didn't do and things like that. But at that age, I like them showing that, because in animation it's hard to kind of convey. You know, you could say she's a certain age, but she acts like whatever in certain things. But here she's an actual girl.
Yeah. You can see how much Ahsoka would then like look up to and admire Anakin.
Oh yeah.
As a very large like molder of her lifestyle. And I think that making the choice to put Ahsoka, I would argue though, I feel like it's the actor had to be like older Ahsoka as younger Ahsoka. Like, I don't feel like I met young Ahsoka. I feel like 40-year-old Ahsoka became like young-bodied to relive this experience.
I'm still talking about the visual though, that she was that age.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter like whether or not what this is. She was still that age when everything happened, and she was still that young.
Yeah.
You know, and so that visual of that is more.
It's really cool. I was going to shout out the young actor who plays Ahsoka, because she has to think of all of those things, that it's not just her being Ahsoka, it's her being like Rosario Dawson being Ahsoka, and then how that translates into her performance. And I thought Barbie's daughter did a great job at portraying that and capturing some of Rosario Dawson's, like, even like the slowness of which she crossed her arms and like some of the scowling on her face. I was like, I wonder if you guys got to like work on this together, because I feel like they did a really good job at capturing the Ahsoka essence that we met in the live action with this younger performance.
There's probably some confusion to the listeners. She's not Barbie's daughter.
She's Barbie's
Barbie
daughter.
doesn't have a daughter. In the movie, she plays the daughter of the person who was designing Barbies and designed the... Is that what you're referring to?
No, she plays the daughter of America Ferrera.
Which is not Barbie.
She is Barbie. She's just a human Barbie. We're all Barbie, Mattias. Don't Ken on me.
Again, the confusion
She's
being that
the daughter.
Barbie played by Margot Robbie. She's not the daughter of Barbie.
We are all Margot Robbie's daughters, are we not? Anyway, so again, you can tell that Ahsoka really looks up to Anakin, and why then watching Anakin's descent into what he became affected her so deeply. I think they're connected on a very intimate level, because she is so young and she grew up in these incredibly traumatic circumstances under someone that like vowed to protect her and teach her and show her the ways of things. And then to watch him turn into what he turned into, I think she carries a lot of that weight. And this explains why, because she was literally a child going through these experiences. She wasn't a grown adult that just like watched a friend or like a colleague go through this sort of transformation. So yeah, seeing young Ahsoka really worked for me. And again, shout out to the actress, because I think she did a phenomenal job, from her chemistry with Hayden Christensen to like the fight choreography she was given. I think she holds herself very well in like all of her scenes.
Mm-hmm. And so those scenes being, we see the first mission and during the Clone Wars, and then we also see her after, apparently, Anakin was, I guess, during the events of Revenge of the Sith, he was off doing other things, and she was no longer needing him to be on every single mission, and she was a part of the siege on Mandalore during the Clone Wars, and how, and these are the two major memories, as well as her having to see the aftermath of war with a lot of the clone troopers being very what's the word I'm like, hurt, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And during these moments. And we're dealing with, again, the idea of a child at war, and then what that teaches someone, as well as just the ramifications of war in general, and how that not only just affects a child, but affects people who go on to a time of peace afterwards, and what that looks like, and how hard it is to, whenever you've been forged in, and majority of your life has come from war, how hard it is to change how you react to things.
Yeah.
And that is the major point here, is of going through these memories, I believe, is her understanding what the past has done to her. You know, essentially going through things that might not have been traumatic at the time, but are essentially the things that really shaped to why she does things that the way that she does now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love when Anakin, the line that stands out for me is when Anakin says, you know, when my master taught me, you know, it was a time of peace. You know, essentially admitting that he doesn't know how to teach her war. She's learning just as much as he is. You know, he doesn't know how to teach them. He's like, this is how we were going through things. And he's done a few missions. They've done a few like tactics and things when they've run into trouble, you know, but a lot of the Jedi things that he was trained as a Padawan growing up for 8-10 years of his life, whatever, since he was young Anakin to the Clone Wars, was a time of peace.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's learning as much as her, and how much that probably like shaped his understanding of things, you know?
Yeah.
I like that admittance, you know, and how that also affects how she did get taught, because she essentially did have to kind of teach herself. And this is just how things were done. You know, I see how part of me, it's gonna be I guess a huge chunk of me talking. I'm sorry, guys.
I was gonna say I have a quick interlude, if you can hold on to your thought, of not only is he doing so much learning as a teacher, and she's obviously learning as a Padawan, but that then shapes the way that she sees herself moving forward and growing up. So because this is not a time of peace, this is a time of war, she sees herself as a warrior. She's someone that brings chaos and destruction and like damage. And she carries that with her from a young age. So of course, as we see her grow up through this continued like traumatic landscape, that she holds these beliefs of why she can't get close to people, because that's not who she is. Who she is an agent of chaos, not an agent of peace. And that resonates with her because of that experience.
No, absolutely. And then also goes on to like why she hasn't taken on any. Because she doesn't know how to teach anyone, because she was brought up in war. And in the same way that Anakin was the person who was taught, his master taught him during a time of peace, doesn't know how to teach war. She only knows the time of her master teaching her during war. Yeah. She doesn't know how to, like, we're in a time of peace.
Right. So of course her thing is like, you need discipline, you need focus. Like we don't bitch out. I can see her being like that type of teacher. I talk about my dance teachers all the time, and like people in the stunt community. It's like, oh, you got hurt? Cool. Shut the fuck up. And like, if you're good, you're good. We keep going. It's your discipline. It's your like fortitude. And that makes so much sense when you're brought up in a hellscape war zone. But for someone like Sabine, or like someone like Jacen, someone very young, it's like they don't need all of that just yet. They don't need that fire. They don't need that intensity. They don't need that damage, because like where do you build the safe level of foundation? Where do you build the security to then add on top of, well, here's how you would react when things go poorly. It's like she doesn't even feel equipped to that, because she never had that. So how do you teach? Like you would just teach what helped you survive, which is like hardcore focus, discipline, like stoicism. So I think she's like, that informs that decision so much. She's terrified. And that's why she's pushing Sabine away all the time. And that's why Sabine gets like under her fucking skin, Because I'm sure there's probably a part of her that sees a little bit of her in Sabine, as you would in like any Padawan you took on. And maybe like how much that hurts her too, to know that like she could ruin Sabine in a way through training her wrong.
Absolutely.
Wrong.
Well, I think that's always been like, we talked about the struggle of taking on a Padawan and all these kind of things. It's like she doesn't know how to teach people because the person that she learned from was Anakin, who at the end of the day has this specter always looming over him of like he became the worst of the worst, and all she knows is from him, and she doesn't want to pass those things down. And she doesn't know who she is now at the moment, so there's a whole lot of that going on already in the background, that this is also now just it kind of further enlightening that. So absolutely, that's true. I thought that I was going to get away from talking about veteran stuff,
Never.
Military stuff in a nice jaunty series, about space whales.
Space whales.
But this is Star Wars, and it is about war. And one of the things that I've always found interesting is how we've never cared, because it's fantasy, it's sci-fi. We kind of treat these things very differently in our fantasy kind of elements. Like war is a big, vague term in Star Wars, where a lot of the trilogies and a lot of the movies are defined, yes, by war. We're dealing with rebellions and an empire. Now, there's still like clear good lines of good and evil, And I know the Clone Wars probably delved into this like a lot more and stuff. But even here, like war doesn't ever like feel like war, And I like to think that there's some intention there, that they're trying to bring the evidence or the elements of things where, like, even though it doesn't feel like war, it's still very impactful. We love the relationship between Ahsoka and Anakin because they're, he calls her Snips because she's snippy and he's kind of sarcastic or whatever, and there's this element of like training a Jedi, and all the kind of stuff. And there's never, and because the clones and the robots, there's never an idea of like the consequences of war, and what that does to soldiers. I love that we are showcasing that, like, nope, there are people that are affected by this. The clones are very much affected by this, and even in your snippy, fun, quippy ways of doing war, and there's never any like real stakes there, and there's never real any we're not showing like the gritty side of war with Ahsoka and Anakin, that still clearly was impactful, that it still was like a thing that mattered to her and her upbringing, and maybe we're not going to get like a Star Wars PTSD thing. I don't know, maybe Andor will do that. But like, what is their version of PTSD in this world? Like, I don't know. We're not going to get that. And like, is she suffering from that? No. But I do want to point out the fact that, again, like I like that they're delving a little bit into like showcasing those consequences, and also showing how like we have fun. We love seeing lightsaber, we love seeing battle, all that kind of stuff. But it is haunting her for some reason, Do they do a really good job of like showcasing like why? Like, I don't know, but like we can delve into the elements. This isn't Saving Private Ryan of Star Wars, but it is showcasing how these moments where, again, it affected her so much, and she probably was going through, again, before the specter of Darth Vader was there, before her own trauma and her having to leave and all that kind of stuff. When she was just a young Padawan, she was enjoying learning to be a Jedi and like having to learn how to do all that kind of stuff. And she wasn't dealing so much with the consequences of it, but that is still what haunts her. How we go through our lives not thinking about how, like, we talk about child trauma all the time, and we're all technically traumatized. And I hate using the word like as a generalization, but it is in the sense like, what are the things that we weren't paying attention to that like still haunt us? You know, that at the time we didn't think about the stakes or we didn't think about the consequences. We were just having fun, you know, and this is all we know.
Mm-hmm.
And these are the things that we have to reckon with and that still haunt us, you know?
Yeah.
And that very much is war, you know, because at the end of the day, you do have to change your brain in war, actual war, to survive, to get through it, to do some of the things that you have to do, you know, in order to get from day to day or whatever. And how that is hard to switch back when you come back from war. That's what reintegration, why that's so hard. And that's a big thing that I harp on when it comes to our veteran shows and our anything that has to do with actual war and soldiers and things like that, is that we have a trouble showing, and we only ever show like the PTSD side of it, which I don't think is all encompassing of what it's like, you know? And so, yeah.
This is going back just a little bit, but there's a moment where Ahsoka is comforting
one of the clone soldiers,
someone that's hurt, and watching the emotions play across her face. It's like she's kind of going through some internal battles and some external of like just taking in the scene and what's happening.
Yeah.
And then Anakin is kind of like flippant and like casual and jokey.
Yeah.
Not quite, you know, he's not a jokester, but he's that's his way of dealing with this, is like with dark humor almost. And we see her get like irritated with him and by that. And again, already at such a young age, like she's making these informed decisions. She's already kind of aware of like where her level of integrity lies, of that like this is already damaging to her sense of self. And if she can't take it seriously and like try to give almost each hurt person like the weight that they deserve, and that Anakin could just sit here and like dark humor joke past it, like that already really bothers her.
I think I'm going to push back on that because I feel like you're conflating like two different things there, because I think that it's quite the opposite. I don't think that that's what happened with. I don't think that's how she was treating it when she was that age. I think how she sees Anakin and how he is not his coping mechanism. That's just how she saw him. I think that's how she treated it. I think that's how she went through life when that actually happened. I think her comforting and being with the soldier now and her getting angry with Anakin now is essentially her older self reckoning with how they treated those situations before. I don't think that's her younger self doing that or standing. I think that's what she wishes would have happened. I think that's what she wishes how she would have treated those things, you know, that she would. 'Cause in essence, like you're right, she is doing that now, but I don't think this is like a one-to-one memory where this is how she's remembering what happened. I think this is, again, her revisiting this memory and doing and approaching it and seeing it now in a different light, you know? And she still sees Anakin as that, as you said, like kind of flippant and like whatever. And that's how it was, because that's how their relationship was. That's how they treated war. That's what I'm saying is like, this is what we see Star Wars as, is them going through this kind of time, and we're not recognizing the actual haunting aspects that we're actually going to carry with us, you know?
I like that idea. I think another thing that tries to inform my decision is she knows what Anakin becomes, and whether she reacted one way or the other. It's like after that interaction, you get the little flash of him like as Vader as well. And the idea that either there's a similarity in them of they both were reacting this way, and she's afraid that like that darkness is also in her. She was trained by this person and idolized this person, or that she was already at a conflict with herself, even at a young age. So it's like regardless of how old she actually is when she's experiencing that, I think that's an important moment. And I liked watching her get angry with him, because whether it's current day Ahsoka or young Ahsoka, the vibe is still there that like this has to hold weight, which is speaking to what you were saying. Like, it has to hold weight. You have to take it seriously. It's not something that you can just brush past and assume that it will never inform decisions moving forward, because it absolutely does. It will impact you perpetually.
Yeah, and I think that's a good time to, again, question, is this actually Anakin or is this her that she's fighting, just in the form of Anakin? Because what we know of the training, apparently in the lore things that we've delved into, is that in order to train to eventually become like a Force ghost, you have to kind of go through training and fight these like darker versions of yourself, and your fears and things like that, right? And Yoda did it, and probably Qui-Gon did it, and Obi-Wan had to do it, and we see Jedi trials. People go through these trials all the time, where just in terms of fighting the dark side and kind of coming into their own as well. The first time we see it is when Luke goes into the cave on Dagobah and fights Darth Vader, and it turns out to be him behind the mask, and we see it with Rey later on when she goes to the cave and like confronts like versions of herself and the fear, whatever, and these are all kind of like metaphorical and not actually happening and things like that. And here, if this is part of her training to eventually ascend, so to speak, just like everyone else, I find it interesting that she doesn't fight a darker version of herself. Or is she? Is my question.
Yeah.
Is that what this is the whole time? Like, is this really Anakin? Or is, as you said, she sees herself, she's afraid of going down the same path if she feels so closely to him. And is that essentially her kind of like fighting herself there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that. Because I honestly, I think that's a more interesting conversation to have than, respectfully, like Anakin Force ghosted his way back here to teach Ahsoka a lesson. I think it's much more interesting if this isn't Anakin trying to like cultivate everything. Sure. Like, I do want it to be, and it's hard though too, because it's like both. When you're one with the Force, you become a Force ghost. It's like but you are the Force. It's all an amalgamation. Like both are true because of the concept of what the Force actually is. Sure. Yes, I'm just saying, like emotionally and mentally, it's very interesting to do that sort of mental gymnastics of, no, don't take it at face value. This is not Anakin making the choice to come back and lead her through these specific things. It's just like how all of this Force nonsense like culminates together to give you this sort of experience. Yeah. So I like that though. I forgot that I mentioned the fact that she's like older Ahsoka, and that it might not be little Ahsoka that had that reaction. It might be older Ahsoka who wishes she took that reaction. I think that's a really interesting point. I think it's also really important that, again, maybe another aside, this is something I kind of feel like I want to bring up. The one thing that I am a little bit frustrated with in terms of the way that they represent it, I do love seeing young Ahsoka. I love seeing her age, as we've talked about. It's given us a lot to discuss and everything. Unfortunately, does no favors for Rosario Dawson, because who's having the actual journey, who's like the character is, yes, but who's doing all the heavy lifting of the Ahsoka turn? It's this young child actress, not Rosario Dawson, which is unfortunate. Well, I do see, again, I want to get into it later on because I do see a change, obviously, but it's the person who does the heavy lifting here is not Rosario Dawson, who is the main actress of the show, which is just kind of unfortunate in doing that, right? It puts it where we can still see the character go through these things. I wish it was Rosario, not the young kid doing it, And again, I really liked the younger Ahsoka's even like energy and camaraderie with Anakin. She's very charismatic, even in her like Ahsoka-ness. And I was drawing parallels to Rosario, and I really like her as an actress too. Like, I'm not shitting on her at all. It's just there's some sort of disconnect somewhere that I struggle with.
I think we're going to talk about that later because I feel like you've brought that up a lot, and I do feel like that was intentional now, based on what we've seen. Because in seeing also young Ahsoka, she does feel different because again we're seeing the Ahsoka that she was during the Clone Wars and during Rebels, which was much more vibrant, much more like charismatic and lively, you know,
right.
and also just a child, you know. Full of emotion, full of spunk and whatever. And I think that's intentional. I think it's important. I wish all the heavy lifting of the character wasn't burdened on this child actress. I think she did an amazing job.
Yeah, she killed.
I just wish that if, you know, the one time like Rosario Dawson can show anything, in terms of not the version of Ahsoka that she has been in the past few episodes, and have these moments with Anakin, all that kind of stuff, we don't give her the chance. We just give it. It's still this character, so it's fine. Yeah. But you know, at the end of the day,
it works in terms of the story, but for the actress, it's like, oh, it's kind of a bummer for you. Well, moving forward to, I guess, adult Ahsoka, literally lightsaber fighting Anakin. I love the shot of they're in that block and you see the like red intensity of Anakin's eyes and how it like briefly flashes in Ahsoka's eyes. And it's like there's that little visual cue of she's not choosing actually whether to live or die. It's like she's choosing what type of path she wants to travel down, and that if she has this idea that the way of the warrior is violence, this is her actively making the choice to like disengage from that. And I even liked in this episode watching her engage with non-violent uses of the Force, like the way that she tries to sense Sabine and how she like talks, senses and engages with the star whales. It's like she's using the Force just as strongly as she was before, but now she's doing it in like different methods. So yeah, visually I really like that moment, and emotionally I like that moment too, because part of you can't tell me part of you isn't just like, I could kill you right now. I could. Her blade was right there. And like just deciding and sitting with that decision of like, that's not actually who I am though. We talked about it with Balin in the last episode too, of how he would really probably rather not fight if he didn't have to. Like you could just talk about it, maybe charismatically manipulate you into doing what he thinks is best for both of you guys. And Ahsoka is like, blades, bitch, we're going. Like, this is what we do. We fight. So if that's in her, if that's like, that's been her core belief since she was a young child, that she is this agent of chaos, that like violence is her path and it is her legacy and it is her destiny. And then she's like, you know what? I'm too old for this shit. I don't need to do this.
You say agent of chaos a lot, but I don't see her being like an agent of chaos. I just see her as being like an agent of what she believes is good and right, you know? It's just turned into that same thing where in order to enact good, it has to be violent because that's what she was brought up to believe.
Right.
You know?
And I think she sees herself as that.
And that's what the Jedi became. And as that person who grew up with them, like, and especially coming from Balin's perspective, I still say that that's what he hated about the Jedi, you know, and seeing her as basically like the child of the Jedi, you know, and how she has been trying to be good at this force of good throughout the galaxy, and him rightfully pointing out that like your way of doing it is the way that is very blunt, very violent, very much tip of the sword kind of way of doing things that he is kind of essentially fighting against, you know? And I do like that that's hammered home here in the kind of thing in the world between worlds stuff, you know? She owes a lot to Balin. She probably should say thank you, because if it wasn't for him, like, would she even be here? You know? It's a very interesting thing. Like, is he not essentially helping train her and by giving her this moment for herself, you know?
Very true.
Where would she be if he hadn't pushed her off a cliff? You like how I always twist things, huh, Shannon?
I love it.
Yeah, Yeah, I don't know if I ever saw her. And that's because when she eventually does come out of it, I feel like there's like a little bit more chaos in her than there was before.
Really?
Yes, because I think you're conflating chaos with violence.
Mm-hmm.
Chaos isn't always violent,
Sure.
Chaos is just unpredictable. It's more of just allowing things to just kind of happen. And when she comes out of that, because here's what I'll say. We might as well get to it. Let's just get right into it. How do I preface this? We loved all the moments, right? And she fights. She gets out of the world. She chooses to live, in her own words, by not fighting.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Well, you have learned a lot, or whatever."
There's hope for you yet.
There's hope for you yet. And that was the test all along, was to get away from your violent ways and to look at ways and different ways that you can do things, and also to embrace who you are. Embrace kind of versions of yourself that you've locked away, which is what we're getting to. And she finds herself, she gets rescued. She comes back.
Oh, okay.
Reborn in water.
Yeah. Let's talk about. I loved watching her sink. I was like, it's a baptism. Like, she's being.
Sure. We've seen it.
Take it as what it is, but hold on. I wrote down just a
it's
little.
It's always this way, right?
Of
when
course.
you're rebirthing someone, it's always this way. It's like you have to put them underwater and come out. The very religious iconography in that. It's like, it's not. It's very, very present that it's not it's not subtle, I guess.
Yeah. And I like the imagery of that, because again, if it feels more like a personal and spiritual force journey, like, of course, this baptism from one stage of your life into the next stage of life, like, should be conducted with water. I really, really liked that. And I like that if we were saying it's lore based, but that Ahsoka is like representative of the light side of the Force, that she serves as that like spirit of hope. And when she comes back, the energy that she has, that resonates with me. Like, she feels like and this is why I would take the chaos away, is because now I feel like I do trust her more.
You're gonna get it back.
I'm sure. I feel like I trust where she's going, because she's coming from a pure place of motivation. She's not operating out of place of like fear of what she could become if she makes the wrong decision. She's operating from a place of, I know where I stand within the Force, and now I can move forward accordingly.
Sure.
Why'd you say it like that?
Go ahead.
No, why'd you say it like that?
We'll get to it.
I'm done. That was my sentence.
I mean, I agree with you. I just feel like there's always going to be a lot more to it, So she is essentially like, she's baptized through the Force. In essence, she comes back changed and different. Details aside, she, or many details, she tries to search through and figure out like what happens to be, and she goes through some memories, and then she comes up with a way to finally get to the galaxy and to go after her, which we've been saying from the very beginning. I know everyone kept being like, oh, maybe she'll use the world between worlds to like walk there and get to the galaxy. I'm like, no, it's gonna be the whales. We introduced them, and we know what that is, their migration path. Of course it's going to be the whales.
It's the whales.
You finally got there. They finally figured it out. And again, I'm going to get through the little details, because I know we're going to eventually talk about these things. So I'm just, they go through the whales. She talks to the largest one,
mama,
Huyang, who says, it's, I believe, one of the larger whales. Oh, you believe? How do you think that was?
That visual input really doing you good,
What
huh?
was it? Oh, you think Huyang? That's one of the larger ones. Yep, I think so too. You know what? I believe you are correct, Hu Yang. Droids telling us things that we know. Don't tell me the odds. Useless. While holding back the fleet, she talks to the whale, and then they go in and they went. Here's what I'm getting to, Shannon.
Mm-hmm.
It is no secret, and it's been said a lot, and I'm sure it's going to be said quite a few times now that we finally get it. We talked about the white cloak before. And we talked about because in Rebels, she went from having gray to like a white. And it is no secret that Dave Filoni is a huge fan of Lord of the Rings and a huge fan of Gandalf. And these are essentially, the Jedi are space wizards. And I don't think it's been a secret that Ahsoka is his way of also kind of implementing some of those themes within this, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And what has now been not very subtle is a clear representation of someone who is a space wizard going to a different kind of realm after like a battle and falling down a huge cliff or chasm or whatever, and then coming back having been physically and emotionally changed and representative of the white blanket that she has around her that is now a cloak. Thoughts just on that? Anything?
Just continue, because I feel like you have an opinion.
Well, sure. And I think that this is just very clearly now he is outright saying like this is now Gandalf. Like Ahsoka is Gandalf in essence. What's interesting is I think that she kind of took a little bit of an opposite change to what Gandalf did, because Gandalf the Grey went from being kind of this kind of fun-loving wizard or whatever to a little bit more concerned as the White. He was a little bit more of concerned with certain things, and you know, a little bit more straightforward and kind of blunt, and not as like fun-loving, I would say. Whereas she kind of takes on the Gandalf the Grey kind of demeanor of things when they are finally in the whale, and Hu Yang's like, how do you know that they're going to take us there? And she's like, I don't know. Isn't that the fun of it? What is an adventure? You know, like it's just, you know, do you follow your feet? You know, like kind of like this weird, like just kind of, I would say, more chaotic energy of fun and emotion and just allowing things to kind of take you. And then her demeanor, and she's clearly ascended as a Force user or a Jedi, to no longer being of the stoic, emotionless person that she has been, but allowing herself to become again what she was, or I'm told like more of an emotional and kind of carefree person, and not being so strict on certain things, you know?
Yeah.
And to me, that's the chaos energy.
Yeah.
That's the thing that I'm seeing is like I don't know that she was so chaotic before, but she is clearly presenting of more chaos energy a la Gandalf the Grey was when we first meet him, you know?
Yeah.
We don't ever know what he's up to or what he's gonna, and he kind of doesn't know either, because he's just kind of like along for the ride, and he brings the Hobbit along on the journey, but at the end of the day, he's like, I don't know what's gonna happen. This is just a fun, interesting experiment for him to be like, how is this Hobbit gonna perform, you know? And will they perform the way that I think they're gonna perform? You know what I'm saying? Like that's the chaos energy that I feel like she's presenting now with Hu Yang and how she's going about things. Yeah.
I think it depends. I think where you put your chaos is the important indicator here. So for me, the chaos is internal, manifesting as external. So the idea of, again, like she operates under, as the Grey, fear and restriction, refusing to make connections out of fear of what they could become, refusing to engage out of fear of what might go wrong. So there's chaos there because she wants the control and she wants the comfort and the security, but she doesn't have it because she's terrified of what the possibilities are. After this sort of transformation in her, it feels that she, again, I think I said a little earlier, like she's made peace with who she is within the Force. And now all of her motivations can come from a place of like connectivity because she's not afraid of what she's capable of anymore. She knows what she's capable of. She knows that she doesn't have to choose to be the violent warrior. That being a warrior doesn't just mean destruction. It can mean connection and discovery. And I like that she went through this transformation process because by trying to control all of the outcomes, she was a more chaotic person. Yes, I could always count on her to pull her lightsaber, and I could always count on her to have sort of like a dismissive response for Sabine, but you're bringing out these bubbles and these pockets of like rage or anger, dismissiveness, and now it's like there's this peaceful smile on her face when she says that almost is a little unhinged and can be, I agree with you, like it can be seen as chaotic in a different way in the sense that we now don't know what she's going to do. We've met a new Ahsoka. What is she going to do? What do you mean she just hopped on this star whale hoping for the best? To me, that says growth for her character because before she would have been terrified of what could go wrong and how she could fail. And now she's like, you know, I'm one with the Force is one with me, and I'm motivated by this desire to like love and protect. So I think either way, two very interesting things to play with, whether she does become more chaotic in a sense, and if she does become more peaceful and grounded in a sense, both are incredible character dynamics to play with now that we've gotten past like the scared stoic Ahsoka. And I am interested to spend 3 more episodes with her in this new stage because we don't know fully what she's capable of because she's been holding herself back in different capacities.
Sure, which I would argue is still a little bit more chaotic energy than she was before. But I mean, I think, because words for me matter, and they always matter for you because you always like a good use of a word.
Mm-hmm.
I think what you're talking about, just to give you a different way of like looking at it, is the tumultuous intensity within her, like all the turmoil that she's been dealing with in the past, of like the struggle that she's been going through within her, that has allowed her to like, again, shut those things off, be stoic, be good, be whatever, you know, and those kind of things. Yeah. Even this, like, I don't even see like this being her more calm or peaceful. I feel like that's besides the point, because that was like her struggling to like, I have to be calm and peaceful before, which led to the stoicism and led to the whatever, and like be like all the things that the Jedi kept saying like things had to be, you know, and that was the turmoil within her that I feel like you're reading as chaos, that would essentially kind of like burst out of her, you know, in different ways, in different formats, stuff like that. And her is like, yes, now that turmoil has in essence been quelled and now is more peaceful. To me, doesn't say that she's less chaotic, you know, just different words and definitions there that I feel like maybe will help people kind of define and understand like what we're saying.
That's a good layer.
Idea or whatever. And hopefully people can tell us what they're seeing, if that's true or not in their perspective and views. But I'm curious, like, if you do, having said all that and having like witnessed this, if this has helped you, because I think one of your biggest criticisms has been the stoicism of these characters, right? The stoicism of our women characters in general, and especially Ahsoka and Sabine to a certain extent. And does this help you now looking back on it? Does this change and this turn into more peace, calm, emotional, whatever, chaos difference in Ahsoka? Do you look back on what we've been getting from the character and the writing and the acting and the stoicism of that? Does that help? Does that change anything for you? How you viewed it?
No. My critique was not against a stoic character. My critique was in how the stoicism was landing with me as a viewer. And I think an example I gave was like Joel in The Last of Us can be a very stoic character, but I was immediately ingratiated to him. My disconnect comes from either we were saying like what performance, direction, writing. It's like I'm not connecting with the stakes behind this character's stoicism.
Sure.
But I do love that, like, yeah, I want to see people have emotions. That's why I come to media. And that's why stoicism is interesting, because you're battling against something that comes as literally like second nature to us. We have feelings, so we want to express them. So watching a feeling combat a choice of stoicism is an interesting dynamic. And I wasn't seeing the bubbling beneath the surface of some of these performances. And that's what I'm missing. I'm missing like the percolation and the water boiling. But even more importantly, this continues to touch on a theme that we keep flirting with, mostly with Sabine so far, of doing what you're good at and like trusting what you're good at. And this can kind of tie into that, because now if she's gone through this metamorphosis and the peace comes from accepting herself and realizing what she brings to the table instead of the fear of the other influences, it's like look at the power that you can step into when you do what you're already good at. And if this is something that has always been in her, like you were saying, that she does strive to like help the greater good and try to keep things organized. So it's like, cool, that's been in you the whole time. You've been fighting against that. You've been fighting against making these connections. You've been fighting against following this way because you don't want to be warped by anything. And now you just like, you kind of know who you are. And that's cool. And I hope that we get to see that reflected in Sabine a little later. And maybe in other characters too. But I'm excited about this turn in Ahsoka because we essentially get to meet a new character. Mm-hmm. And I think that's very exciting. I like the little bit of time we have already gotten to spend with White Ahsoka. So yes, I think I will be less complainy about like the time that I get to spend with her, because I'm like, she's just stoic and I'm not understanding why. Women can be stoic. I don't mind stoic characters, but just for clarity, that's where the disconnect was coming from me, is I didn't feel the integrity behind the stoicism.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Well, I tried Rosario. I tried my best.
I'm sorry. It's like with someone as just badass and talented as we all know that she is, it's like, what does me even saying that actually mean? I don't, but I don't take it back. That's how I feel, and I'm sorry.
Sure. And so do you also, I know we kind of went through it all, and it feels like we did get a lot out of the time between Anakin and Ahsoka. I am curious if that all worked to that turn. Did that all, because at first when I was going into this, I was like, I don't know that, I see the turn and I see everything that happened and I see the results and I can see like what they were trying to do. But did it actually work in telling me? Did it actually like show me what I think they were showing me, or am I like digging and trying to? Do you feel like? Do you understand what I'm saying?
I do understand what you're saying. I like the end results, so I'm looking, I think, with more kindness on the journey. Mm-hmm. But again, it works for me more if this is all like a force, like Jedi mind trick, instead of like two people actually experiencing this moment together. Like if she was actually fighting a ghost Anakin, I don't think I would like it as much. But the concept is there. She is struggling with something that traumatized her in her past that is informing her current fears, responses, and decisions. And to be the best version of herself, she has to reckon with that. I think that information was all laid out for me, even if every beat or every moment either didn't work for me or felt a little heavy-handed. I think all of the concepts were there for you to read into appropriately. Do you feel differently?
I think that maybe looking back on it, we got to see Anakin again, and that was cool, and we got to see her young, and that was cool, and all that kind of stuff. And then at the end of the day, I'm like, am I really connecting the dots to all the different things, to the visuals or whatever like that these are essentially changing her to get out of that. I'm not exactly sure that the scenes or the conversations like actually led to those moments. I feel like we're imparting a lot of what we know and what we're supposed to be getting out of it, like onto it, you know?
I think you're right.
I don't know that the imagery and stuff is actually as impactful or should have been as impactful to her as like we want it to be. And I wish it had been, I wish it had been, basically. And that's not to say that we clearly had a conversation about it and we can get these things out of it, but it's still very much they're touching on these things, but not delving too far into it, you know? And I wish they just would go ahead and do it. But I could be wrong. It's just maybe how it affects me or how I connect with it. It's just not doing it. And in essence, again, when we talk about Star Wars in general, again, these are for not us. As they are, it is always going to be for, 12
a younger audience
or whatever. And you don't need to get too deep into these things. And if it's there, if it's enough, if you can derive and you can see the turn, that's technically all that matters. I don't know that I saw the turn. I don't know that necessarily was enough for her to suddenly be, Gandalf the White at the end of it, But it is, if it's enough for a 12-year-old, then it's enough for me,
And to add a little bit of fuel to that fire, I think that's why a moment we both like, even though we read it differently on first view, is just that little moment of her holding that trooper's hand and being mad when he makes light of the situation. That is actually the only moment that's not visual that sticks out to me of those two battle scenes. And I think, again, it's because, is this actually what she's struggling with? She is struggling with either how she treated things like this, or how she wants to treat things like this, or the fear of how her master treated things like this, and she thinks that she's going to become that. Like, that is such an interesting moment, and I feel like it was so small. I don't even know if it was meant to be that intentional, but to me, that was a really good moment where you got to think about, what is she actually battling with here? And
again, people that age they don't get that in their Star Wars often. So I'm glad it's there.
Yeah.
I'm glad that they're trying to like touch on these things, even if it's a little bit quick and maybe unearned for her to like eventually get there from just these moments. It's still, I'm glad that they're at least trying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
So what can I say? Do you, do you think Tamora Morrison played every single clone trooper that we saw on screen? Or
after what you told me last night, I hope so.
He didn't. There's definitely no way.
Damn it.
They put him on a green screen, and that's all just Tamora Morrison running around. And
honestly, what a great way to spend a day on set. It's like, we need you to just be all of these fighters. Be like, let's do it.
I'm sure he would have been down.
Yeah.
He loves being part of the Star Wars things. He loved doing the Book of Boba Fett as much as we didn't quite enjoy it. Do you think she's gonna train Jacen?
I hope so.
You didn't take on more Padawans now in the future. In
I hope
her
so.
Chaos way of being like, you know what, I could train everyone now.
Fuck it, Jacen, come on. Let's throw some fists. Yeah. I hope she stops training Sabine, respectfully.
I think she's going to do both, Shannon.
I want her to stop training Sabine because I want Sabine to just like be a Mandalorian and like use what she already has available to her. And then I want to see Ahsoka be like a true leader to a young Jedi.
Yeah.
A strict Jedi, not a Mandalorian who wants to be a Jedi because his best friend is gone now. Yeah. Like, he has that in him innately, and I want to see her come into that with him. Yes, do it.
And we're finally at the point where, again, this is also what Baylan's doing.
Yeah.
But now she has finally gotten the new way that she is. I don't know what it is, but I'm seeing is that there's a new way of her approaching things and a new way that she's going to train people. And I think that is the new way that is no longer very Jedi based, but has these elements of the Force and what she's learned and all that kind of stuff, and
Mhm.
will hopefully blend into a new way, which is what Balin was trying to do. And hopefully now we're seeing the difference between like how he approaches things versus how she is going to approach things, and maybe we won't relate so much to Balin,
Mhm.
because again, he was doing what was right and what she should have been doing, but
Yeah.
now maybe she can catch up to that. And again, owes a lot to Balin.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's the one that put those thoughts into her mind in the first place
Yeah.
before throwing her over the cliff. I feel it's all intentional, Shannon. I think maybe she's
We
the secret.
heart Balin.
And yeah, and again, in terms of our anticipation for next episodes and things like that, I do think that Hera is probably going to go and lose her generalship, and I don't know what that means, but I feel like that hopefully means the band is going to get back together in essence, because what else does she have but the family? And I believe that is going to disillusion her to the Senate and the rebels and whatever they've been doing, because how else does the Republic fall later on? But if you don't have those people on your side, if you disillusion all these people into being on your side, then that's essentially what's going to happen, and that's just my view on things. I do hope that Jacen ends up being part of like the trainee force or whatever that goes into the movies,
Mhm.
I don't know how much we're actually going to get of that, because there would probably need to be like a little bit of a time jump to get some people caught up, but I do hope it involves the small band of people and new Jedi essentially,
Mhm.
and going to Thrawn, and I hope that's huge and big and powerful and like takes up a lot of the time frame that we have missing between the 30 years or whatever between Return of the Jedi and
Mhm.
though I am curious, like, how do we do that without Luke? Or I mean, I'm sure Grogu is going to be there, but like, how do we do that without Luke? And how do we do that without Leia and Han? But I think that is we have to set up this is the new group, because we can't, unless we want to again keep deep faking or doing whatever. I don't know.
I don't want to keep doing that.
It's going to be hard to fill in that gap, but I do think that Thrawn and whatever is going to be happening is hopefully not just going to take up like, oh, this happened within a couple weeks and then it was over. I think
Right.
it should take up a huge chunk of time.
Mhm.
The secret war essentially that happened before the First Order came along. I don't know.
Yeah.
I am glad that clearly, no matter how many theories we have, how much we keep trying to figure out what's going on, Dave Filoni keeps saying, nope, it's not what you thought. This isn't what it is, and they have some sort of plan, it seems like. I don't know, the true chaos energy was Dave Filoni. And
all along.
yeah, any of your thoughts on future episodes or what we might get? I mean, obviously we're going to this new galaxy.
Yeah. We have a new galaxy. I think I'm sorry, I have hiccups now. I'm interested to see what the importance of Shin and Balin are moving forward. Like now that we got to spend a whole episode with Ahsoka, and I know Sabine is there too, but again, Balin and Shin are just very interesting characters to me. And I'm like, really, what is your role in any of this? In the same way that I gently complained that Hera like doesn't, I don't mean this, but like doesn't really matter. Like I could take away most of Hera's scenes and still have the same story moving forward. It's like without Shin and Balin as people to fight in the forest, like what are they really doing? What do they really want? So I'm hoping that as we now enter this new galaxy and Sabine's on board with them, that we're going to get a little bit more of a like, what the fuck is up with the Dathomir witch lady, Morgan, and how all of that plays together. And then yes, I think that will eventually lead us to Thrawn, and then the concept of Ezra as well.
Yeah, I am kind of hoping that they don't. It's kind of hard because unfortunately we don't have Ray Stevenson anymore. So
Right.
Balin is probably going to be gone in one way or another by the end of this. But I hope they don't just. I hope the plan wasn't always to just bring them in and then kind of have them be like just something for like just dark side users for them to, dispatch of and do whatever, so that there can be an evil force for them to fight, my question is maybe Shin redeemable, Balin, unfortunately, I think is just not a question because whether or not he is, I don't like as a character, we're going to lose him, I think, but is Shin redeemable?
Right.
And is Shin, will she continue throughout,
Or like in the concept that she loses Balin, does that motivate her to maybe join Morgan's side more balls out? Like, so yes, it has to be Shin's character, unfortunately, because we know we don't have access to Balin.
Or are they just going to kill all the bad guys, which they always do because that's the point, and which is
boring.
Unfortunate. I hope not. I hope they keep Shin around, and I hope that again, if we're gonna dive into these kind of things and whatever, like Ahsoka, if you're able to change and be, can you impart this onto not only your trainee but the trainee of another person, who's maybe disillusioned and kind of was doing some similar things but in his own way, that you were doing, and can you pull someone back from that? Can you, if your new way is exactly what we were kind of presenting at the beginning of this season in the show, and now that you've kind of come back around to finding a new way within yourself, can you actually impart that and give that to someone who is searching for that?
Yeah.
Not just in Balin, but in Shin, and can that be redeemable? I find that very interesting. And we'll see. Maybe Shin's one of the Knights of Ren. Just kidding. I don't know. I hate the Knights of Ren. That's a stupid thing that they introduced, and then they never. It was so dumb. So yeah, that's a few of our thoughts on that thing. Do you have anything else that in what I just said that you wanted?
I think that sums it up. I think that's a good amalgamation.
What do you think, guys? Is Shin redeemable? Is Ahsoka now more chaotic than she was before? Is Hu Yang ever going to teach Jacen how to build a lightsaber? Find out next time on this episode of Codependent Content, talking about Star Whales, Ahsoka. If you have any thoughts, please email us at codependentcontent@gmail.com. You can always comment on YouTube. You can go to our Discord, vulgarianorder.com. You can chat with us there. Find us on TikTok. Do whatever. Give us the feedback. Give us your thoughts. Give us your questions. Please let us know what you thought of this episode and our conversation and the things that we got wrong. We know Star Wars fans love to tell us everything that we got wrong. I'm sure you have some information that we don't have. Feel free to let us know. Go do those things. But as always, I'm reaching out with the Force and asking Shannon telepathically, but I'll voice it for you guys because you can't hear it. Is that like, will you join me? Will you put me in your mouth and transport with me to the next episode of Star Whales, and then chat with me about it afterwards? Shannon, will you be there?
It takes her a second, but if she listens closely enough, she senses the Force, and she said she'll meet you there.
Okay, great. See y'all then.